Of the 13 colonies involved in the American Revolution, South Carolina presents itself as one of the most integral parts of the tide of war, as many battles were fought and won by the Patriots, ultimately leading to American victory at Yorktown, showing God's providence for the victors in receiving their promised land. Within the colony of South Carolina, there in existence was a great disparity between those who were patriots and those who were loyalists in support of the British. This battle for support and control of the colony would eventually provide the British with the idea that taking the South was a great way for them to win the American Revolution. According to Peter Moore, the British believed that there were a great number of loyalist support that existed within the South. This information was given to them from exiled loyalists who were in London who really wanted just to get back their confiscated lands. These exiled loyalists exaggerated greatly the amount of those who were loyal and supported the British crown in the South, but they knew that in order to get the British command to decide to turn the war south, they had to exaggerate that information. And so the British Army operated under the expectation and the belief they would find support for their actions within the southern colonies. The British had actually previously tried to take the South in 1776 with the Battle of Sullivan's Island. It was an unsuccessful military action by Benjamin Clinton, and it's a story that many South Carolinians know about how the British tried to attack by sea, but Fort Moultrie, which was kind of the gateway to Charleston, it had its fort built out of palmetto logs, and palmetto logs bounced off, and so great damage was not done. But the British decided to strike again, and from 1778 to 1781, they made a second and much more successful attempt to take the South and to take the Carolinas, and it began at Charleston. What I have for you over the next 3 slides are maps of the battles that took place within the state of South Carolina. If you would like to pause and to look at them, you very well have the opportunity to do so. And what you'll notice with a lot of them is that there were a great number of battles that actually occurred within the state. Here's another map. And here's another one. The first major military action that took place in the state of South Carolina was the Siege of Charleston, which, as you see on the slide, lasted from March 29th till May 12th, 1780. The British laid siege upon the city starting on April 1st, and it lasted again, like I said, till May 12th. General Henry Clinton actually marched upon Charleston from James Island and pretty much cut off the city from any and all outside relief. The British forces fought a smaller number of battles outside of Charleston, Monk's Corner, and Linnets Ferry, and in doing so, they scattered a lot of the other support for those living in Charleston, the patriots living in Charleston. And so, Patriot leader Benjamin Lincoln, the head of command in Charleston, was really not able to get many of the much-needed supplies that he needed in order to survive, and so he experienced a great deal of suffering and a lot of damage to the city because of this. As the British pretty much continued to attack, Lincoln decided to hold a war council in which he decided to surrender everything. He had inadequate war fortifications and inadequate provisions, and so he really had no choice. And so he pretty much surrendered over 5,000 soldiers to Clinton. This was considered the greatest loss of manpower and war equipment in American war history. Purcell and Purcell say that with the fall of Charleston, the major trading seaport in the southern states, and the loss of an entire American army, the cause of the revolution in the South appeared to be at the lowest ebb for the Patriots. After taking Charleston, Clinton left for New York, leaving Lord Cornwallis in charge of conquering the remaining southern states. Because of this, many militia groups decided to form in the Carolina backcountry in response to the loss of the numerous soldiers to General Clinton. I have for you here a map of the Siege of Charleston. Again, if you have or would like to pause, the video and look at that, it's a great opportunity for you to do so. You can see how over here you have Clinton and his army and how they were able to pretty much push the American or the Continentals in this small area, and then you have an American fleet which really wasn't able to do much, and then you have a British fleet over here which kind of pretty much cut off the Americans from any other relief or any other help. A few days later, in modern day or present day Lancaster, South Carolina, May 29, 1780, another major battle took place between Patriot and loyal forces. Abraham Buford, a Patriot colonel, marched towards Charleston in hopes of providing relief for Lincoln, but of course he was too late. Instead, he was ordered to wait at Lenox Ferry for further orders. There, he met the remaining soldiers who were able to escape, and he was ordered to go back to North Carolina and to regroup. Lord Cornwallis heard of Buford's forces and sent Lieutenant Colonel Banastre Tarleton, pictured right here, on May 27 to intercept the group. Tarleton actually reached the camping place of Buford and sort of began a quick dialogue. Tarleton sent a guy by the name of David Kinloch to speak to Buford and to give him a note. The note said, and he exaggerated this, that I have 700 soldiers in hopes that it would cause Buford to want to surrender. This, of course, is not true. He didn't have that many. The note also said, resistance being vain, to prevent the effusion of human blood, I make offers which can never be repeated. Meaning that Tarleton was pretty much saying, I'm only going to ask you for surrender once, and if you don't, suffer the consequences. Well, of course, Buford, being a man of honor, refused, and he prepared his men for battle. Tarleton responded by mounting an attack against the soldiers that were there. And as his forces pretty much started to tear and rip the pretty much ill-prepared Patriot forces asunder, many surrendered and laid down their weapons. As Buford realized what was going on and saw this defeat, he too dispatched the white flag of surrender, asking for quarter. Unfortunately, as the story goes, Tarleton was actually trapped under his own horse, and he was unable to call off his men. In the end, the British soldiers ended up killing many, many men that were surrendering, and this caused major issues going forward. Patriot accounts say that the flag was used properly and that those deaths afterwards should not have occurred, but many of the British accounts don't even mention the white flag at all. The perceived affront to rules of war caused many who were neutral at first to begin supporting the Patriot cause. From the British victory, the mythos behind the cruelty of Banastre Tarleton also was developed, as well as the rallying cries of Tarleton, remember Tarleton's quarters, and remember Buford. Tarleton's quarter, excuse me. Here's an artist's rendition of the Battle of Waxhaws. The next major battle, the Battle of Waxhaws, had for the most part completely driven out the majority of continental resistance in South Carolina, aside from a few partisan groups. General Horatio Gates, the hero of Saratoga, regrouped the remnants of the Continental Army in Charlotte, North Carolina, and decided to make a plan to take Camden, South Carolina. Camden was considered to be the gateway to and crossroads to the backcountry, and Gates, figured that they could take, Charleston, Camden. It'd be easier for them to go forward and take Charleston. Gates advanced towards Camden, which at the time was garrisoned by a guy by the name of Lord Rawdon, and so Gates' men camped just north of Camden. But unfortunately, they experienced a great deal of hardships, and a lot of them were really not able to battle when the fight happened, when it was time to fight. Lord Cornwallis learned of Gates' movements, and he sent reinforcements. The aforementioned, Colonel Tarleton was one of the ones that was sent there as well. On August 16th, the fighting erupted between the two sides, and during the fight, many of the militiamen actually fled, and this lowered the numbers on the Patriot side. And if you look at the picture on the next slide, you'll see how it shows an entire flank pretty much disappeared. After just 1 hour of combat, the American troops had pretty much been decimated and defeated, suffering over 900 killed and wounded and 1,000 captured. Tarleton's cavalry actually continued to pursue Gates' fleeing army for about 20 miles until they pretty much stopped. That same evening, in defeat, Gates fled back to Charlotte. This victory by the British pretty much cemented, at the time, their control of the southern states. And here's a picture. Again, I encourage you to pause and look at it. That pretty much shows what happened at Camden. Gates's troops were here, and then some of them fled, and then the British just pretty much was able to come over and take the rest of them. And here too is another map, showing what happened at the Battle of Camden. The Battle of Kings Mountain was considered to be a major turning point, or at least the beginning of a major turning point in the Southern Theater of War. In September 1780, Lord Cornwallis had actually invaded North Carolina. Go back to the map if you want from the earlier slides, if you wish to. And he told Patrick Ferguson, who is this guy right here, told Patrick Ferguson to go out and try to get as much loyalist support in the North Carolina and South Carolina backcountry as you could. And Ferguson made the bad choice of pretty much challenging all of the rebel militia and said either you lay down your arms or you'll suffer the consequences. And of course, as we know, they rallied and decided they were going to actually attack Ferguson. Ferguson, when he heard about this possible attack, actually decides the best thing to do is for him and his men to escape and to try to head back to Lord Cornwallis to reconvene and strengthen the numbers. And so he actually camps at a place called Kings Mountain. You look at more battle maps in a second here, right on the border of North and South Carolina. The partisan groups actually ambushed him on October 7th, and they inflicted heavy, and I mean heavy, damages upon the group, even eventually killing Ferguson himself. Loyalist Captain Abraham de Peyster, who was pretty much left, he was left in command, employed or deployed the white flag of surrender, asking for quarter. But for several more minutes, the Patriots rejected the white flag, continuing to fire and killing many of them, shouting, "Give them Tarleton's quarter and give them Buford's play." You know, they don't. It's retribution for them. A large number of the surrendering loyalist militiamen died, and a second white flag was sent before officers from the rebel side or from the Patriot side finally were able to calm down and to stop their soldiers from killing. All in told, the battle itself lasted for 65 minutes. The Loyalists suffered 290 soldiers killed, 163 wounded, and 668 taken prisoner, while the Patriots only suffered 29 dead and 58 wounded. Oops, sorry. And here are two maps that show forth the Battle of Kings Mountain. And as you can see in this one here, these are the British men, and then are surrounded by them, you have all these militia groups who are firing upon them. Same thing with this one. You have the British encamped at Kings Mountain, and you have many, many, many loyalist groups who are firing upon them, mostly in retribution in hopes of inflicting heavy damages, which of course they did. The Battle of Cowpens was a point in which the Patriot side of the war experienced a true reversal of the war. It saw Daniel Morgan, pictured here, and Nathanael Greene working together to defeat the British that were encamped that were pretty much chasing them. While Morgan threatened British from one side, Nathanael Greene and his forces threatened Cornwallis' troops from the other. Tarleton was sent by Cornwallis to stop the advance of Greene and Morgan's forces. He had over 1,000 men. The battle actually took place on January 17, 1781. Morgan used a great attack and retreat strategy that sucked the British into to being attacked by other groups. This is where the double envelope or the pincher or double envelopment, or the pincher strategy was used, resulting in the defeat of the British. This was a great victory for the Continental Army and pretty much drove the British back to Charleston and into smaller surrounding areas. This was considered a turning point in the reconquest of South Carolina for the British. Daniel Morgan's army took 700 prisoners, including 200 wounded, and the British lost its best soldiers from Cornwallis' army, and even Tarleton suffered an 86% casualty rate. Pretty much his entire brigade was destroyed. And again, here is a map of the battle. Like I said, take a moment to pause to look at it to see how it happened. The same here. This better shows the double envelopment. So take a second to look at this strategy if you have an opportunity to. After the British defeated Guilford Courthouse in North Carolina in 1781, British Commander Cornwallis decided to move the remainder of his troops into Wilmington. With Cornwallis out the way, Nathanael Greene, who didn't really suffer many casualties, actually just met with some militia groups, that were led by Thomas Sumter, Francis Marion, Andrew Pickens, and they decided to attack one of the remaining fortifications in the Carolina backcountry located in 96. There was a little fort called Star Redoubt right here, and Greene and his force decided to take it and to take out this area. A number of attempts were made. The siege itself started May 22nd and lasted till June 19th. And a number of attempts to take Starfort were attempted, but in the end, Lord Rawdon actually sent reinforcements. And when Greene heard about this, he decided to evacuate the plan. Rawdon decided to go ahead and to evacuate the area himself, and so they pretty much burnt down the remainder of the Starfort. Greene saw this evacuation of the garrison as an opportunity to attack the evacuating troops, but because of the tardiness of Thomas Sumter and Marion, he was not able to do so. So Greene decided to rest his men and to prepare themselves for the next battle, which would take place months later on September the 8th. The last major battle in South Carolina actually took place on September the 8th, 1781, in modern-day or place known as Utahville now. This would be the last major engagement, and it would see the colonists the Patriots become victorious. After the siege of 96, Rawdon leaves Charleston for England because he felt sick and left Alexander Stewart in charge. Greene decided to march his men towards Charleston with the goal of taking back the city. As the men marched, so too did Stewart's forces. Stewart's forces started camped around Eutaw Springs, and at this camp, they also were camped out in a very strong big brick house. He would normally send out foragers to try and get food. Well, on September the 8th, the foraging group was ambushed, and so the Battle of Eutaw Springs begins. The battle ebbed and flowed to a point where the British forces were forced to retreat back from their camp into the strong house. The house was occupied by Major John Marjoribanks and his battalion. William Devin James said that the British or the Patriots used this opportunity, and actually they tried to attack this brick house that the British were at. And it says, thus a most favorable opportunity for completing the route already commenced was irretrievably lost. Greene had now brought up his artillery against the brick house and sent for Marion, who came to his assistance. But the weight of his metal was too light to effect the breach. Here, after losing many men and making unavailing attempts, he was obliged to desist, bringing off one field piece which he had taken from the enemy, and losing 2 of his own. Thus Sheridan and Marjoribanks had saved the British army. Some consider this a British victory, tactical wise, but many saw this as actually a strategic American victory. Greene was never truly defeated, and some believe that if he had opportunity to attack again, he would have, but bad weather did not allow it to occur. The aftermath of this battle showed that the British could not stop Greene's continuing operations, forcing them to abandon most of their areas and being left pretty much in Wilmington, Charleston, and Savannah. And here is Battle of Eutaw Springs. While it may not have been the largest or most powerful colony at the time, South Carolina proved to be one of the most important in the Revolutionary War. As evidenced by the battles addressed, South Carolina was important as a means of lowering and lessening the power of the British in America. The defeats at Kings Mountain, Cowpens, and Eutaw Springs greatly lowered the British manpower, crippling their powers and resources. The failure of the Southern Theater provided embarrassing defeats that would further lead to the American victory at Yorktown. Cornwallis's best soldiers were decimated, and overall the British force could only call small enclaves of their home bases. Many colonists considered it to be a sign of God's providence that America could win the war against one of the largest military powers in the world. I liken it to Judges 7 and the story of Gideon. Gideon led a small force of Israelites who were able to defeat a much larger force with God's help. Or the many stories of the book of Joshua where the children of Israel were able to fight the many battles to gain the promised land. American was Gideon's forces and the small force of Israelites who defeated them with God's help. The partisan groups in Continental Army forces that fought South Carolina with God's providence showed forth how a small force can defeat a much larger power and bring back God's promised land for God's people. Thank you.